Helldivers 2 is just receiving bad news after bad news. Is the end finally truly here?
You know, we've seen a lot of developers ruin their games in the past, especially when it comes to live service games, but this situation is unique all to itself. Just recently, the Helldivers 2 community popped up, and they're basically calling for the end, feeling as though they've been betrayed by Arrowhead Studios. They just want to sit back and watch the world burn, and to be honest, I'm right there with them.
Imagine how bad this in reality is, especially the people who played Helldivers 2 from the start to up to this point. How absolutely betrayed they probably feel. People used to look at Helldivers 2 like a dark elf looks at a kindergarten. It was that intense. And now
I try to remain as partial as I can be in these kind of matters. I want to get as much perspective as I can because I want to be sound in my judgments, sound in my criticisms, and make sure they're constructive. But in the case of Helldivers 2, I'm at my wit's end. This game started off as one of the greatest releases that we've seen in recent memory, a game that took the world by storm, minus 180 countries, but regardless, it was still a game that...
Yeah, it kind of literally rivaled Palworld, and if Helldivers didn't have the server issues at the start, it would have probably been bigger even, potentially.
For a lot of players, including myself, represented what we wanted to see more of in modern games. A fairly monetized game, a game that was well supported by its studio, a studio that openly communicated with their audience. But in the case of Helldivers 2, they have just continued to fumble the bag. It should have been a year-long victory lap, yet here we are. So what happened this time? Can it be fixed? I don't know. Let's find
It seems like they're trying to fix it for the past, I don't know, however long months.
out. Regardless of what many games journalists will try to use for their headlines, the crazy highs of 450k concurrent players on Steam, millions of players logging in every day, wasn't realistic for a relatively repetitive horde shooter like Helldivers 2.
30k average players is still a lot. It kind of rivals Destiny in that sense.
With that said, the game will be lucky to hold on to what players it has left before the end of the year. A post 2 days ago on r/Helldivers read, "Let the bots advance, let Super Earth burn," showing an image of the automatons only a few planets away from Super Earth, which would mark the end of the game. This post is in response to the latest update, Escalation of Freedom, where they had planned to release new weapons, a new war bond, new biomes to explore, new enemies to fight, new objectives, new different...
Escalation of Freedom did seem good, and people were hyped about it. What's happening? Are people already not happy with the Escalation of Freedom? Yeah, that seems a little bit off.
Difficulties, and a massive enemy encampment. A well-deserved shot in the arm of much-needed content for the game. With
You know what Helldivers would actually need? It would. It really needs some kind of break away from open ground combat, and have a situation where you're thrown in, for example, a tunnel where you need to get to the heart of a hive or something like that. Something more confined to just switch it up. I think that would help Helldivers a lot. Because it would be different. Yeah, you would need to rework a lot of things. But, I mean, do it. What else do you have to lose at this point? Your own audience is kind of demanding blood.
With Escalation of Freedom being the first major update since the game's release. So with all of this content being added, why are the players upset? Well, that's because this update came with a balance patch and a balance changes to a bunch of different weapons across the game, which lit a fuse of growing unrest. While I'm not going to recap the balance changes themselves, the most notable changes came in damage reductions to the most used weapons by players, as well as the flamethrower support weapon, which...
Oh god, that's gonna piss everyone off. Because, you see, the thing is, players don't care if something's broken. They use it because it's the best. There's no such thing as a favorite gun in Helldivers. We're simple creatures. We want to do something, we find the best tool for it, and that tool is now your best friend that you put under the pillow and sleep on. And you're kind of hoping it's not a grenade, otherwise things get messy. But that's how it works. So if you nerf the most used gun, people are going to be pissed. Because it was just the best thing for the job, and that's how it works.
If you played Helldivers 2, should sound familiar, as this was a major issue of contention when the game got its first balance patch, and saw nerfs across all the community's favorite weapons, claiming that they were trying to rid the game of meta loadouts. The community backlash over these weapon changes wasn't
I wonder why they're not using this tactic. Okay, there's a meta gun that people use the most. The reality is that gun just does the most damage and blah blah blah. Well, you can choose to not nerf the gun. You can choose to buff other guns and buff the enemies. So everything is still kind of equal. So effectively, it's a nerf through buffs because other things are as effective.
Received well by the developers in charge of the balancing at the time. They ended up taking to Reddit, trolling the fans of the game in the comment section, going as far as saying, I am feeding the rage a little bit for my own entertainment here, just so you know. Note that the company did apologize for the developers' comments, and the dev deleted their entire account in true Reddit fashion. Now, while that developer is no longer
Reddit never fails being a hive of losers.
Longer in charge of balancing, this balance philosophy has stayed with the game, likely spurred by player sentiment, because meta loadouts and meta gamers were scorned at the release of Helldivers 2 as players just wanted to play the game casually and wanted to use what they wanted to use. They didn't want Helldivers 2 to become some type of try-hard game like many other live.
Now, admittedly, even the casual player, when they have enough hours under their belt, are gonna figure out that, wait a minute, this is the best weapon, I'm still gonna use it. Again, our judgment, what is the most fun, is almost always governed by the most damage and most effectiveness.
Live service games have become. With that said, this is a horde shooter, a power fantasy mixed with survival horror. You are a Helldiver, a dealer of death in a universe that deals it back just as hard. However, when you're noticing that most of your players are using the same weapons, maybe it's not because those weapons are overperforming, maybe it's because everything else is underperforming. Yep. Now, I know what you might be thinking, weapon balancing. That's the reason why players are so upset. That's the reason why they feel like Arrowhead Studios has betrayed them. Normally, you'd be right to think that.
Nah.
But in the case of Helldivers 2 and the kind of game that it is, it's...
But wait, there's more!
Unique. Think about it like this. Helldivers 2 is essentially the exact same game that everybody's been playing. There's some added content, mild variety for the most part. You're dropping in on the same planets, fighting the same enemies, doing the same objectives, but all of your weapons are progressively feeling worse as the enemies have gotten stronger. Meaning as, from the player's perspective, the thing that they've enjoyed doing is becoming less fun. And I think that's the biggest problem with this game. They are not balancing the game from the perspective of the player, they're balancing it from the perspective of an Excel sheet. Not the feel of the player and how these weapons feel to you.
This is what I have been saying about World of Warcraft's balance. That it doesn't seem like they're balancing anything from a player perspective, that it's just an Excel sheet where you have, for some reason, skills that are not in any way equal on the same tier in the spreadsheet, and they need to be balanced, even though those skills are not even remotely equal. Yeah, when you do balancing through an Excel spreadsheet, good luck. Good luck.
Use, or using the common sense of, oh, I don't know, maybe the reason why players are using certain weapons more is because those weapons are just objectively cooler. Like, as an example, the railgun, one of the coolest weapon ideas in all of it.
Okay, well, that's true. You do need a sniper class. You do need something to scratch the itch of the snipers without giving them actual met. And, well, that's a sniper rifle.
Video games. Everybody loves railguns. An arc launcher, shooting lightning out.
Hey, I do love the rail things, that's true. Especially your mom.
Out of a gun. Of course people are going to be using stuff like that. Flamethrowers, of course they're going to love stuff like that. So maybe those weapons aren't overperforming. Maybe it's the fact that the rest of the weapons in the game are less interesting. And I think that's the case. I think that's what's going on. Well, people use sidearms and things like that in the game. For the most part, most players are just trying to use the coolest weapons because it looks the coolest in the game. It's one of the game's biggest strengths, its cinematic nature and how cool it looks when you're in some of these big fights. And they need to think about
that's true to a degree.
About that. You've lost touch with the one thing that a lot of people were looking at you and saying that this is one of the studios that we love because of this, which is the fact that you seemed like you were in connection with the players. You understood the players. But as things have gone on, and I got to eat crow on this because I pushed back on players for a while saying that the first balance patch they did way back when was just a one-off thing. It's obvious it's not, because they just don't understand what the players want. Look at the mech. They ruined it. thing sucks to use. I can't stand it. The rocket launchers don't work anymore because you can't aim at close range or proximity or anything like that. The rest of the weapons feel less fun to use. The game has just progressively got less fun. And when the game is less fun, what do you have left? And with that, and with these changes and not listening to their audience, Arrowhead Studios has also lost the one thing that they really had going for them: the trust of their players. Part of the popularity for the game was driven by how clearly and regularly Arrowhead Studios was communicating with their audience. Johan Pielstedt was on Twitter constantly responding to fans, giving feedback, giving updates, and making...
Oh, the bygone times. Ah, man, everything was better. Man, why is everything better in the past? Why is the future just so grim and bleak?
sure that the game was available to as many players as they could in the rough weeks that were following the game's launch. I mean, you actually had players that were completely okay with how frequently they were getting disconnected, and they forgave the fact that the game could not accommodate that many people with its growing demand. However, as time has gone on, their failure to act on community feedback and how they've communicated with players has only continued to disappoint. It's genuinely crazy to see how things have progressed. We went from celebrating a game made for everyone is a game made for no one and talks about how not to rip off players with microtransactions to...
Also, the more time has passed, the more I see situations like this in Helldivers, where you're literally shooting a single bot in the face, and that's kind of it. It feels like the action is slightly kind of just gone to a degree also.
Raiders taking shots at fans that had genuine concerns for the game. Developers teasing and purposefully ignoring player feedback. Sony blocking access to the game in 180 countries. And bans over using angry emotes on furry art in their Discord. You had a smash...
Ah, yes. Protect the furries. The furries destroy everything! Ask Valorant. It's currently dying because now the furries are protective class, and if you don't roleplay with a bunch of losers in a ranked match, you're gonna get banned because you're destroying their Uwu time fun. Okay? Now, I'm not saying we need to reclassify a bunch of things as mental illnesses, but we definitely kinda do. And that should be actually a priority.
Hit, a cultural phenomenon that stormed the scene at the start of the year, and you're slowly but surely starting to resemble the studios that players criticize the most.
When are we gonna finally do it? Just classify Britain as a mental illness. It needs to be done. And Germany, and Sweden, and France.
I'll be honest with you, Diablo 4 and Helldivers 2 going in opposite directions was not on my 2024 bingo card. When you've lost the ear of your player, what do you think are the optics on the recent update and balance changes? You nerf fire damage and other weapons in the game, yet you come out with a fire-themed battle pass. Either players are going to think, oh, I'm not going to buy that because fire damage feels less effective, or they're going to think that you purposefully nerfed the weapons in the game so that you could potentially boost sales for an upcoming war bond. Not to mention, along with the damage nerfs, there was a visual nerf. The flamethrower support weapon before these changes used to leave trails of fire, drip fluid on the ground, and spray realistically. Now, not only is
wow, yeah, that's actually real-life flamethrower
weapon weaker, but it looks weaker as well with all of those effects.
Oh, wow, that is just pathetic. What the fuck is this? Are we making s'mores? What? Marshmallows? Camping trip, maybe?
It's removed, and a cheaper animation in its place. Helldivers went viral for how
does it make sense to actually nerf the animation also? One of the biggest things I'm constantly talking about games and why are they not successful is actually animations. Like, because look at this. This is just so unbelievably worse than what we saw before. Okay? If a new player comes in and use the flamethrower and this is it, it's like, oh, this is horrible. This is boring. This is disgusting. And so many games suffer from this. One of my still biggest gripes with Last Epoch is exactly the fact that some animations just look bad. They need to, make the animations look good. That's it. Animations matter so much. If what I'm using feels shit, I'm not gonna use it, okay? Even though if it's the best. This is another, by the way, completely broken thing. And I talked about this a lot in Dota 2. Dota 2 is the greatest example of this, okay? There was a time in Dota 2 when there were clearly overpowered things in the game, and no one used them because they just felt bad to use. Even the competitive scene didn't use things that everyone agreed are completely overpowered, but they just feel bad to use, so no one used them. It is absolute insanity how this stuff happens. Animations matter more than being overpowered, honestly.
Helldivers went viral for how cinematic the fights looked in the game. It was part of its charm, and now you're removing that from the game as well? From the perspective of a player, or even just a random bystander at this point, nothing about the last 3 to 4 months of Helldivers shows a game that's improving. It's just a game that's progressively getting worse, losing the interest of general audiences and that of its active player base. Shams, the new CEO of Arrowhead Studios...
Now, to be fair, considering I have looked into the Helldivers situation multiple times, and the fact that those previous times also that the player numbers were roughly around 30k, I mean, yeah, people are pissed, but people are not actually leaving the game, it looks like.
Recently responded to player feedback after the game saw a recent crash in Steam reviews yet again, tweeting, "Getting humbled" on Reddit as usual, as players posted an image of the recent review scores and a screenshot of him on Discord saying, "So the trick for us as we try to parse feedback is that we have some folks who are very loud. While a lot of you are in the game and like it, we don't know. I've noted that people aren't fans of nerfs, duh, and performance could be better, but really, where are we at? We have a lot of folks who are very loud, while a lot of you are still playing the game and like it, ? Players are not complicated girlfriends that are sending you mixed signals. They're playing the game because
players are versed in complicated girlfriends that are sending you mixed signals. Okay, better sleep with that grenade under your pillow, dude.
They like it. They're loud about it because they care about it. I never thought we would get definitive proof of this from Arrowhead Studios of all places, but this is the true opinion that many of these developers run with. And that's that if you are still playing our game, well, then it must not be that big of an issue. You know, I just made a video.
This is a double-sided sword, I would say. Sometimes, because both situations are equally true. If there can be a game that's played by many people, but the game is trash, and it's actually losing out on a bunch of other people who could be playing. Diablo 4 is a great example of that. And then there are games where potentially the people who are just complaining are actually the minority. I don't know if Helldivers 2 fits this criteria. Again, considering we have been talking about the downfall of Helldivers 2 for, I don't know, months at this point, and yet the player numbers... I'll actually check. Steam charts Helldivers 2. Let's go. Let's see, what do we have here? Let's take 6 months, and... Why doesn't that show? Oh, it does show. So, yeah. For the past 2-ish months, the players have been around from 30 to, 40k. It's... That's kind of it. I don't know. We have been talking about the death of Helldivers for a long time, but it seems like 30 to 50k is kind of the bottom that they are experiencing. Now, currently it's 21k players playing only, and 34k is the max, but I don't know. It's really hard to tell. This is like a coin flip. It's so hard to figure out what's actually true in this situation.
Video called Warframe is a Wake-Up Call, and in it, I talked about how great that studio does with taking action on player feedback. They're genuinely listening in a way that I don't think I've ever really seen very many studios ever emulate in the past. They take that feedback and they turn it into something that makes a meaningful change into the game.
Yeah, but again, this is the problem. When do you start listening to feedback? When your game is crumbling, like Diablo 4? Because currently, people who are giving feedback for Diablo 4 are going to eat that slop and be happy no matter what. So their feedback is effectively useless, and they're kind of just giving feedback that pushes Diablo 4 further from the mainstream audience. So... I mean, do you want to follow that feedback? Probably not, honestly. You probably want to ignore that feedback.
Game, and it makes the game more fun for the players that are playing it. And there's not a lot of studios that do that, and there's not a lot of studios that even probably think about doing it. But that is how you get a better game. And in the case of Helldivers 2, with how open communication has been between them and their fans, they haven't taken any action. And I don't know if they will. In response to further outrage from the Helldivers community, Shams took to Discord yet again to respond, saying, I haven't spoken to everyone, of course, but many of us are disappointed on a few levels. On the one hand, the update had a bunch of nice stuff that aren't getting talked about, maybe deservedly so, as many aren't happy with the latest balance round. I think more broadly, it has us discussing the path ahead and what we can do to avoid the situation again, i.e. internal learnings, more changes in process, etc. I think a lot of you fairly pointed out, WTF, we went through this earlier in the year, why are we here again? And I hate sounding like a broken record, but A, we have long lead times on development, i.e. what you see in the game is the result of weeks and months of development work. Some changes take time before they show. B, not a whole lot of time has passed between now and the June balance round, and most people are still on vacation. We still need to improve a lot in understanding what players want and marry that with the development process. We want every release to be a step in the right direction. Constant improvement. I don't think we feel this was...
Oh boy, I don't feel we're gonna actually get a conclusion to what's gonna happen here, but we kind of just have to honestly wait and see in this situation. I don't know about that, boys. Anyway, that was Legendary Drops. 10 out of 10. Bye!